junk and don't bother coming back. This stopped being your house the day you got too old to be useful. That's what my own daughter screamed at me on the coldest night we'd had all winter, right before she threw a beat-up hockey bag at my boots and slammed the door so hard the storm window rattled. I stood there on the porch I'd built with my own 2 hands, 66 years old. Snow coming down sideways off the lake, and I honestly thought that was the end of my life. Then I unzipped that bag in the dark, and I found $680,000 in cash and a folded-up letter with my name on it in her handwriting. The next morning, I drove 4 hours through a whiteout on the Coquihalla to the address tucked inside, and when the door opened, the person standing there was not who I expected, not even close, and it changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. Before I tell you who it was, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments, has there ever been somebody in your life who fought for you when you'd already given up on yourself? Just type yes or no. You'll understand why I'm asking by the time we're done. My name's Lorne. I ran a heating and plumbing outfit up in the Okanagan for 41 years. Started out of the back of a Ford with a borrowed pipe wrench and finished it with 6 trucks and a name people trusted when their furnace quit on Christmas Eve. My wife, Vivian. She kept the books, and she kept me honest. And when the cancer took her 7 years back, I sold the business and let it go. I built our house myself on a spit of land overlooking the water, back when that land was worth nothing and the road out front wasn't even paved. Funny how time works. The town grew up around me, the rich folks discovered the lake, and that little house I framed up in my 40s was suddenly worth $2.5 million on paper. Didn't change how I live. I still drove an '04 GMC with a rust hole the size of a toonie in the box. Still bought my coffee at the Tim's by the highway. Still wore the same gray wool coat to church every Sunday because Vivian picked it out, and I wasn't about to replace a thing she'd touched. People used to ask me why a man sitting on that kind of property drove a truck that backfired. Because the truck still ran. That's why. A man who forgets where he came from deserves to lose where he's going. 3 years ago, my daughter married a man named Trevor Hale, property developer. Big white smile, handshake like he was trying to win something off you, the kind of fellow who calls you champ and boss, and never once your actual name. They were going to stay with me a few months while their place got sorted. A few months turned into 3 years, and I didn't fight it because she was all I had left in this world. And a quiet house gets awful loud after you bury your wife. Having her at the kitchen table again, having my little granddaughter's crayons scattered across the floor, that was worth more to me than any peace and quiet. But Trevor had been at me for the better part of a year. Sign the house over, Lorne. Estate planning, he'd say, smiling that smile. Protect the asset. I kept telling him I was 66, not 96, and the asset was protecting itself just fine. Every time the number came up, $2.5 million, I watched something flicker behind his eyes, and I didn't like it. A man learns to read people after 40 years of crawling under other people's houses. You see who they really are when the basement's flooded and the bills due. It all came to a head on a Tuesday in November. He slapped a folder of papers down on Vivian's dining table, the one I refinished by hand, and told me to sign a transfer of title over to my daughter. I said I wasn't signing anything. His jaw went tight. He called me selfish. Said, "What happens if you have a stroke, Lorne? Who protects this place then?" I stood up out of my chair, slow, the way my knees make me, and I said, "Protect it, or control it, Trevor. Which one are we actually talking about?" His face went red, and he said something to me a man shouldn't say to his wife's father, and then he said it again, and the whole time my daughter sat across the table with her hands knotted in her lap, staring at the wood grain like it might save her. That was wrong. My girl had a mouth on her since she was 4 years old. She never once in her life sat quiet through an argument, and she wasn't saying a word. Then she stood up. Her voice came out flat and cold, but I saw her hands. They were shaking like she had the palsy. "Dad," she said, "I can't keep doing this. You're a weight around our necks. You're the reason we can't move forward." And then she went to the front closet, pulled out my old hockey bag, the one I hauled my tools in, and she threw it across the room at my feet. "Take your junk," she said. "This is our house now. Don't come back." Trevor stood there with his arms crossed, grinning like he'd won the lottery, and he put a hand on my shoulder and steered me toward the door. The cold hit me like a slap. The door shut. The deadbolt turned, and I was standing on my own porch in a November storm with a hockey bag full of God knows what, and the dawning understanding that the only family I had left had just put me out with the recycling. I made it as far as the bus shelter down by the boat launch before my legs gave out. Sat on that frozen plastic bench with the snow ticking against the glass and the bag in my lap, and I'll tell you, I have never in my life felt that hollow. Not even at the funeral. At the funeral, I at least had her. Now I had a duffel bag and a rust bucket truck and a coat that still smelled faintly of my wife. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that the cold worked up through the bench and into my hips. Eventually, just to have something to do with my hands, I unzipped the bag. I figured I'd find old work clothes she wanted gone. Maybe my tools. Instead, my fingers closed on plastic, shrink-wrapped bundles of it. I pulled one out under the orange glow of the streetlight, and it was hundreds, pink and purple hundreds Canadian, banded in the middle. I pulled out another. And another. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped 2 of them in the snow. I sat there in the dark and I counted, and when I was done I had $680,000 in cash sitting in my lap at a bus stop, and not one idea in my head of where it came from. Then I found the envelope at the bottom, under the money, with my name written across it. Dad. Just that. In her handwriting. I tore it open and I read it twice, because the first time the words wouldn't go in. Dad, if you're reading this, it worked, and I'm so sorry. Every single thing I said to you tonight was a lie. I had to. A month ago, I got up in the night for water, and I heard Trevor on the phone in the office. He didn't know I was awake. He was talking to Bianca, his accountant, the one he hired last spring. And Dad, I have to tell you what they're, the kind of people they are. Trevor's finished. His lakeshore development collapsed and he's into the investors for millions he doesn't have. He forged documents to hide it. The only thing standing between him and prison is this house. And the house is in your name and you won't sign. So he's decided he doesn't need your signature if he doesn't need you. He talked about an accident. A fall on the stairs. Something that looks like a stroke in your sleep. He said once you're gone he can forge it all, and I'll sign whatever he puts in front of me because I'll be too broken to read it. He doesn't know I heard. He can't know. If he finds out I know, then I'm a loose end too, and so is Hazel, and I will not let that happen. So I'm getting you out of that house first. The only way I could think of, by making him believe I picked him over you. The money is mine, Dad. All of it. Trevor thinks I make $40,000 a year doing freelance drafting. I make 140. I've been squirreling it away for years in cash and GICs he doesn't know exist, ever since I started getting a feeling in my gut about him. Take it. There's a key taped to the inside of this envelope. Apartment 8, the Burrard Court Building, 1140 Bidwell Street, Vancouver. I left tonight with Hazel. I told him I had a client thing in the city. He believed me. We'll be there. Please come. I can't do this alone, Dad. I love you. Your daughter. The key was right there, taped to the flap. I peeled it off and held it in my palm, and I felt about 6 things at once. Rage at Trevor. Pride in my girl so fierce it hurt. And under all of it, cold and clear. A thing I hadn't felt since I was a young man. Purpose. My daughter had walked straight into the fire to drag me out of it. She'd lived a month under the same roof as a man who wanted me dead, smiling at his face across the breakfast table, all to buy me one head start. She had the truth, but she didn't have the proof. She needed her old man, and by God, her old man was coming. I went home. No, not home. I went to my truck, and I drove south. The Coquihalla in a November storm is no joke, and I'm not going to pretend I wasn't white-knuckling it the whole way up the pass, with the wipers losing the fight and the transports throwing slush over my windshield. But I had 4 hours alone in that cab to think, and somewhere around the summit I stopped being a 66-year-old man who'd just been thrown out of his own house, and I started being something Trevor Hale had never once bothered to imagine. A problem. Because here's what that arrogant son of a gun never understood. He gave us time, and time is the one thing a patient man knows how to use. I pulled into the lot off Bidwell a little after 3 in the morning. Found apartment 8 on the 2nd floor. Before I even got the key in the lock, the door opened, and there she was. My daughter, eyes swollen, hair a mess, looking like she'd aged 5 years in a month. She said, Dad in a voice that cracked right down the middle, and she fell into me, and I held her up in that little hallway while she shook. Behind her on a pull-out couch, my granddaughter was sound asleep with her thumb in her mouth, not a care in the world, and I thought, no, this is where it stops. When my girl could finally talk, she said, I hated every second of it, saying those things to you. I told her she'd saved my life and she had nothing to be sorry for. She said, when I had to look you in the eye and call you a burden, Dad, it almost killed me, and the tire I knew I saw it. I saw your hands. You were never that good a liar, kiddo. Not to me. And for the first time in a month, she almost laughed. Then she opened her laptop and she played me a recording, and the laugh died in both our throats. It was Trevor's voice, clear as a bell. She'd hidden the little voice-activated recorder behind the books in the office a week after she first overheard him. She didn't trust her own memory, she said. She wanted it on tape. Smart girl. Smarter than her father. Trevor was saying the old man won't sign. We tried everything. And Bianca's voice saying so. What do we do? And Trevor, calm as ordering a coffee. He's 66, and he lives right here with us. And accidents easy. Stairs. Head injury. Half the time they call it a stroke, and never look twice at a man that age. And Bianca asking about my daughter, and Trevor laughing, and saying she trusts me completely. Once he's gone, I'll play the grieving husband, and she'll sign whatever I put in front of her. We move the house. We mortgage it for a couple million. We clear the debts, and we're gone. I had to put my hand flat on the table to keep it steady. She showed me the rest. Bank statements with $3.2 million missing out of the Lakeshore investor accounts, wire transfers to an account in the Caymans, casino markers from a junket down in Vegas, forged investor sign-offs, and photos. Trevor and Bianca, a hotel in Whistler, a restaurant in Yaletown, his hand on the small of her back. 2 years of it, my daughter said, while I made his lunch. She'd used her own accounting eye to follow every dollar. She'd built most of a case over a single terrified month. So why isn't this enough, I asked her. You've got him on tape, planning the whole thing. Because talk isn't a crime, Dad. She'd looked it up. A man saying he could make something look like an accident. A good lawyer calls that venting, hot air, hypotheticals. They walk. We need him to actually do something we can put in front of a judge. Fraud. Forgery. A signature that isn't yours, on a piece of paper. And right there, sitting in that little Vancouver apartment with the radiator clanking and my granddaughter asleep 10 feet away, the plan put itself together in my head, the way a system does when you finally find the one valve that's gummed up the whole house. If I vanish, I said slowly, he thinks the field's clear. He gets greedy. He forges my name to move that house because he can't help himself. And the second he does, he's not venting anymore. He's a criminal, on paper, in a registry office, with a date and a stamp. Exactly, she said. I'm going to need help, I told her. I can't run this on my own. And then I asked her, do you remember Murray Coyle? She did. Of course she did. Murray was 30 years RCMP, a Mountie's Mountie, retired into a one-man private investigation shop out in Langley because he couldn't sit still. He and I went back to a hockey league in the 80s where he played goalie like he had a personal grudge against the puck. I called him at 7 that morning. He picked up on the second ring, and when I laid it all out for him, there wasn't half a second of hesitation. He just said, where do you want me, and what do you need? That's a friend. You find out who they are when you call them before sunrise with something ugly. By noon, Murray had a forensic accountant lined up. A quiet woman who used to do this for the Crown. By that night, the three of us had a plan written out on a sheet of butcher paper taped to the apartment wall, and somewhere down in the Okanagan, Trevor Hale was tucking my granddaughter's empty bed into a story about how Grandpa just up and ran off after the fight, poor old fella. Never could take being told the truth. The next 8 weeks were the longest of my life. I disappeared. Properly disappeared, the way Murray taught me. Canceled my cards, killed my phone, bought a flip phone with cash and rented a basement suite in New Westminster under a name that wasn't mine. No bank machines, no Tim's loyalty card, no nothing. Murray said the trick to being invisible isn't hiding, it's not existing. I have to tell you, That's a strange thing to do to yourself at 66. I'd catch my own reflection in the bus window and not be sure I was still in there. But every morning I'd remind myself why. My daughter was playing the grieving wife 300 kilometers away, and my granddaughter was teething on the edge of a man's mercy who didn't have any. Back home, my daughter worked her part like she was born to it. She told the neighbors I'd left after the fight, that she was worried sick, that she'd called around the shelters. She let Trevor play the patient husband out loud. He'll turn up. Old guys are stubborn. While she watched him through the little nanny cams she'd hidden in the den and the office, feeding everything to Murray. Murray, for his part, laid a false trail with his old contacts, the kind of thing only a retired cop knows how to do. My bank card got used at a gas station in Medicine Hat. A motel in Moose Jaw took a cash deposit under my name. Anybody looking would have sworn old Lorne had driven east and kept driving. Trevor checked. We know he checked because the camera caught him on the phone with somebody saying, "Find out if the old man's actually in Alberta," and then, a week later, hanging up satisfied. And then he took the bait. Week 1, he hired a forger, a sad little man named Curtis who worked out of a print shop in Surrey. Camera in the den got the whole thing, Trevor handing over an envelope, saying I need signatures that'll pass a notary's eye. Curtis saying that's 10 grand, Trevor saying done. Week 2. My forged signature showed up on a transfer of title at the land registry, signing my house over to my daughter. Murray was parked across the street and photographed Trevor walking out of the registry office with the papers under his arm, whistling. Week 3, he marched my daughter into a Scopank branch and remortgaged the house, my house, for $2 million. And when she asked, careful, whether that was even legal with Dad gone, he smiled and said Dad signed before he left. Sweetheart, don't you worry your head. She was wearing a wire Murray rigged. Got every word. After that, the dominoes just kept tipping. Week 4, he paid down his Vegas markers. Week 5, he started planning his big resurrection, a glitzy launch gala for a new waterfront development up in Kelowna, the very project he was going to fund with stolen money, with investors and press, and the mayor invited. His comeback, his coronation. Weeks 6 and 7, he got soft and generous with my daughter, buying her things, and she said every gift felt like a hand around her throat, but she smiled and said thank you, and she never once slipped. And then, late in week 7, she sent me a recording that turned my blood to ice water. It was Trevor and Bianca again. He was saying my daughter had been asking questions about the paperwork, acting funny. Bianca asking, "You think she knows?" And Trevor, my granddaughter's father, this man, saying if she actually knows, then she's a problem, same as the old man was a problem, and if she ever tries to leave me, she takes half of everything, and I can't have that. I sat in that basement suite in New Westminster, and I listened to a man discuss getting rid of my daughter the way you'd discuss returning a tool that didn't fit, and something in me that had been patient for 7 weeks went very quiet and very hard. This wasn't about my house anymore. It wasn't even about justice. Not really. It was about my girl and my granddaughter, and a clock that was running out. Trevor's gala was set for December 15th. We had 2 weeks. Murray brought in one more person, a member he still trusted, Sergeant Naomi Frost, out of the RCMP's Commercial Crime Unit. Turned out she'd had Trevor's company in her sights for months on the investor fraud, but she couldn't get inside the books. Our evidence filled every hole she had. She went through Murray's files at the kitchen table for the better part of an afternoon, and when she finally looked up, she said, "This is the cleanest case I've seen handed to me in 20 years. Forgery, fraud over 5 grand, conspiracy to commit murder." She said that last part slow. Then she said, "But we take him clean. Public, witnessed, no dark corner for a lawyer to crawl into." And I said, "Then we take him at his own party." We spent the next 10 days building a video. Not a fancy thing, just the truth, laid out so plain a child could follow it. It opened with my daughter reporting me missing, then Trevor's own voice, his planning with the words printed across the bottom of the screen so nobody could pretend they misheard, then the forged signature beside my real one, the loops and the slant side by side, then the bank statements, the wire transfers, the casino markers, the photos of him and Bianca, then the second recording, the one about my daughter, and then, at the very end, my own face, alive, looking right down the lens. Murray got us into the convention center's AV system through a contact who owed him. We rigged it so that exactly 12 minutes into Trevor's speech, his slideshow would cut out and our video would take over, and once it started, Nothing on God's earth could stop it. We rehearsed it a dozen times. Murray kept saying, "One shot, Lauren, we only get one." I checked in with my daughter every night on a clean line. She was running on fumes. "He's getting suspicious," she told me. "He says I seem distant." I told her, "You're almost free. Just hold the line a few more days." The night before the gala, she texted me at 2 in the morning. "Dad, I'm scared. What if it goes sideways?" I wrote back, "It won't. Tomorrow we take our lives back." Then I sat in the dark and didn't sleep either. December 15th, 6 in the evening. I stood behind a black curtain at the Kelowna Convention Center in the one good suit I owned, the navy one I'd worn to my daughter's university graduation, and I watched through a gap as 200 people filed in and took their seats. Investors in good wool, reporters with cameras. The mayor, a fellow named Dunphy, in the front row with his chain of office on for the photos. Sergeant Frost and her people scattered through the crowd in suits, blending in like guests. And in the third row, my daughter, hands folded in her lap, face perfectly calm, except for her fingers, which I could see, even from there, trembling like aspen leaves. Then Trevor walked out into the lights in a suit that cost more than my truck, waving like he was already the man he wanted to be, and he had no idea that in 12 minutes everything he built was going to come down on his head. He started smooth. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Dunphy, distinguished guests, this evening marks a vision realized." The slides came up behind him. Glossy renderings of glass towers. Talk of jobs, community, legacy. He gestured to the third row and said none of this would be possible without my incredible wife, and my daughter gave him a small, perfect smile, and the room applauded, and I dug my fingernails into my palm. He raised his little clicker and said, "Now let me show you the future." The screen went black. He clicked again, frowned. "A technical hiccup, folks. Bear with me." Clicked again. And then the speakers came alive, and my voice rolled out across that whole hall, low and steady. "Hello, Trevor. Bet you didn't expect to hear from me." He froze. Every drop of color drained out of his face, and the screen lit up with my image, and my recorded voice said, "My name is Lorne, and 2 months ago, this man planned to have me killed. Let me show you exactly how." He lunged for his microphone. Dead. Murray had cut his audio at the source. He waved frantically at the booth, but nobody up there was working for him anymore, and not a single person in that room was looking at Trevor. They were all looking at the screen. It played. His own voice, the stares, the head injury, the stroke they'd never looked twice at. A gasp went through the crowd like a wind. Then Bianca's voice asking about my daughter, and his answer, "She'll sign anything once he's gone." People had their hands over their mouths. The mayor sat there gray as ash. Then the forged signatures, side by side, the red arrows on the loops. Then the registry stamp, October the 3rd. Then the mortgage, $2 million borrowed against a house he didn't own. My name forged at the bottom, October the 15th. My voice, even and quiet. I never signed this. I was never even in the province. Then the money. The screen filled with it. 3.2 million gone from the investor accounts. The Cayman wire. The Cayman wire. The casino markers. Over 800 grand to a single Vegas player's account, his. The jewelry receipts. And I watched the faces of those investors change from horror to something else, something hotter, as they realized whose money paid for all of it. A man stood up in the fourth row and shouted, "That's my retirement, you son of a bitch." Bianca tried to slip toward a side door. 2 of Frost's people were already standing in front of it. She turned around and sat back down very slowly. Then the last part, the second recording. Trevor's voice, calm as still water, saying if my daughter ever became a problem, he'd handle it the same way he handled the old man. The whole room went dead silent, and then somebody near the back said out loud, "Oh my God." My daughter stood up out of her chair, tears running down her face, not acting anymore, just relief, just the end of it. And the video closed on my face, alive, and my voice said, "Trevor Hale thought I was old. He thought old meant finished. Here's what he never understood." The house lights cut. A single spotlight snapped on at the back of the hall, and I stepped into it. I walked down that center aisle on my bad knees, slow and steady, 200 faces turning to follow me. Cameras going off like firecrackers, and I kept my eyes locked on the man, frozen at the podium in his expensive suit, soaked through with sweat. "You were supposed to be gone," he said. The mic still dead, just his lips moving. I reached the foot of the stage and I said, "Loud enough to carry, sorry to disappoint you." Sergeant Frost and her people closed in from every side. "Trevor Hale," she said, "you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder." The cuffs clicked shut. He started in about a setup, a frame. "And she said, 'We have you in your own voice, sir. Save it.'" 2 more officers took Bianca right out of her seat. And I turned around to face the whole room, and I said, "My name is Lorne. I'm 66 years old. 2 months ago, this man tried to erase me. I let that sit a second. He failed. Then my daughter came up onto that stage at a dead run and threw her arms around me, and I felt her whole body shaking, and she said into my coat, 'We did it, Dad.' And I said, 'You did it, kiddo. You did it the day you threw that bag at my feet.' And somewhere behind us, they led Trevor Hale away past the cameras in handcuffs. And for the first time since November, I could breathe. Justice up here doesn't move fast, but it got where it was going. With his own voice on tape, there wasn't much to argue, and his lawyer knew it. He pleaded out. 14 years, federal. No parole eligibility worth getting excited about. Bianca took a deal and got 6 for her part in the fraud. The forged mortgage got unwound, the title came back to my name clean, and what was left of the investor's money. Trevor seized accounts. His cars, the Whistler Chalet T, got carved up and sent back to the people he stole it from. They didn't get all of it. They got some. Sometimes some is the best the world can do, and you take it. My daughter's divorce was final by spring. She kept every dollar of her own money, the $680,000 she'd hidden away 1 careful paychecks at a time, because it was hers before that man ever shook my hand. Clean break. Full custody of my granddaughter. And then there was the house. We stood in it together one afternoon in April after the furniture was gone, just the 2 of us, and our footsteps echoing off the bare walls. I showed her the kitchen where her mother taught her to roll out pie crust, the front room where she took her first steps on a carpet that wasn't there anymore. But we both felt the other thing in those walls too. The dining table where Trevor slapped down his papers. The office where she first heard him through the door. She asked me what I wanted to do with it. I thought about it for a long minute. "I built this place to make a home," I told her. "But a home isn't lumber and drywall, it's the people in it, and there's too much rot in these walls now that you can't see. So we sell it." And we did. 2.5 million, near enough, and I split it with her right down the middle. She tried to argue. I told her she'd saved my life and we weren't going to haggle about it. She took her half in her savings and she started her own firm, drafting and design, specializing in accessible housing, the kind a senior on a fixed income or a fellow in a wheelchair can actually live in with dignity. "Good design shouldn't only be for the rich," she said, and she meant it. Her first real project was a little community building out in the valley. And me, I took my half and I started something too. I called it Second Wind. It's a program I run 3 mornings a week out of the Legion Hall in our town. We teach trades to folks over 50: carpentry, basic wiring, how to sweat a copper joint, because a person is never too old to learn to build something. But the part I care about most is the other half of it. A plain language workshop on how to keep some greedy son of a gun from ever doing to them what was very nearly done to me. How a power of attorney really works. What a forged signature looks like. Why you never, ever sign a thing because somebody you love is standing over you saying, "Trust me." So that what happened to me, I tell that first class every term, never happens to one of you. I hired Murray Coyle to help me run it. He grumbles about the early mornings. He shows up every single time. My granddaughter comes to the Legion Hall on Saturdays now, sits up on a stool while I show the class how to read a tape measure, swinging her little legs, calling out the numbers before the grown-ups can. We have Sunday supper, the 3 of us, every week, no exceptions. I'm 67 now. I sleep through the night. I stood up for myself when it counted, and I've got the people who matter sitting at my table, and I will tell you honestly, I have never once been happier than I am right now. People ask me when they recognize me from the news at the grocery store or after a workshop, "How'd you come back from that, Lorne?" and I tell them the same thing every time. I didn't come back. Coming back means trying to be who you were, and the man I was, the one who thought keeping the peace meant swallowing every insult, who let a smiling stranger move into his house and call him champ. That man's gone, and good riddance. I went forward instead. Trevor Hale made one mistake that mattered more than all the forged signatures put together. He looked at a gray-haired man in a rusted-out truck and an old wool coat, and he saw something used up. He never once considered that 40 years of crawling under broken houses teaches a man patience and strategy and exactly when to wait and when to move. He was 39 and greedy and in a hurry. I was 66, and I had nothing left to lose and a daughter willing to walk through fire for me. That was the difference. He had an accomplice. I had a family. One of those leaves the second you stop being useful. The other one throws a bag at your feet in the cold and trusts you to understand it for the gift it was. So if you're out there feeling tossed aside, feeling like the world's decided you've had your turn, you listen to me. You are not your age, and you are not your circumstances. You are what you choose to do next. I chose to fight. If this story moved you, leave me a comment and tell me your own. I read every one, and subscribe here to Voices of Uncle Harold, because there's always another one worth telling, and I'd be glad to have you here for it. For weeks after Trevor was let out of that hall in handcuffs, I kept coming back to one small thing. The moment my daughter's hands shook while her voice stayed cold. That's the picture that stays with me. Because everything that happened, the good and the ugly both, traces back to choices people made long before that night, and the bag landing at my feet was just the bill finally coming due. Trevor thought he could shortcut his way through life. He lied, he forged, he gambled with money that wasn't his, and he figured an old man in a rusted-out truck was too worn down to notice. But a person who cuts every corner eventually runs out of road. And he did. None of that fell on him by accident. He built it, brick by brick, the same way I once framed a house. Except his was rotten from the foundation, and rotten things come down. That's not luck. That's just what dishonesty earns you if you give it long enough. What saved me wasn't strength. I want to be plain about that, because folks like to imagine some dramatic last stand. There wasn't one. What saved me was that I refused to lie to myself about what I was seeing, even when the truth was my own son-in-law wanting me dead. I kept my head when everything in me wanted to fall apart, and I leaned on a friend I'd kept honest with for 40 years. Murray didn't think twice when I called, and you don't earn a friend like that overnight. You earn him one decent act at a time, over decades, until it's just who you are to each other. And my daughter. Lord, my daughter. She did the single bravest thing I've ever watched a person do, and she did it the hard, patient way, gathering proof, holding her tongue, smiling at a monster across the breakfast table to buy me a head start. That's not recklessness. That's the kind of steady courage that doesn't look like courage at all from the outside. It just looks like a woman making her husband's lunch. She had the backbone to keep going when she was terrified, and the wisdom to know that anger alone would have gotten us both killed. So if you take anything from an old plumber story, take this. Be the sort of person who tells the truth even when it costs you, because a clean conscience is the only thing nobody can forge. Think before you swing. Patience beat Trevor where fury never could have. And when you get knocked flat in the cold and you're certain it's over, get up anyway. You are never too old, never too far gone, never too discarded to stand up one more time. I'm 67. I sleep through the night, and I learned all of that from a torn hockey bag and a daughter who trusted me to understand it.